In a small, quiet village surrounded by forests, an extraordinary event would soon leave everyone in shock. A widow lived a simple life with her young son after losing her husband. The boy was only 7 when his father passed, leaving the two with no one to rely on but God. Despite the weight of her struggles, the mother worked tirelessly to raise her son. She sacrificed her comfort, her rest, and even her health, all for him. Years passed, and her son grew into a strong, capable young man. Seeing him marry and settle down filled her heart with pride. The son brought his wife to live with them in their modest home, and at first life seemed peaceful. But soon his wife's discontent became apparent. She didn't want to share a house with her mother-in-law. "She's old," the wife complained. "I won't serve her. If you want me to stay with you, you must get rid of her." The son tried to ignore her words, but she repeated them day and night, filling his mind with doubt. Her persistence wore him down, and soon her influence overshadowed the love he had for his mother. One day, unable to resist his wife's demands any longer, the son came up with a plan. He told his mother he would take her on a walk to enjoy the fresh air. Trusting him completely, she followed without question. They walked together deep into the forest, far away from the village. When they reached a secluded spot, the son stopped and turned to his mother. "Rest here, mother," he said, forcing a smile. "I'll go find some food and water for us. Wait here, I'll be back soon." His mother sat down on the forest floor, her heart filled with gratitude for her son's kindness. She didn't suspect for a moment that he had no intention of returning. Hours passed. The mother waited patiently, but her son never came back. As the sky darkened, tears streamed down her face, not because she feared for herself, but because she worried something terrible might have happened to her son. A passing farmer, traveling through the forest, noticed the woman sitting alone, silently crying. Concerned, he approached her and asked, "What are you doing here, alone in the forest?" The woman wiped her tears and replied softly, "My son brought me here. He went to get food and water, but he hasn't returned. I'm worried something has happened to him." The farmer looked at her with pity, realizing the tragic truth she couldn't see. The mother, still seated in the forest, shared her story with the kind farmer. She told him about her son, how she had raised him alone after his father's death, how she struggled to give him a better life, and how proud she had been when he married. The farmer listened intently, his face filled with concern. After a moment of thought, he hesitated, but then said gently, "Mother, I fear your son might have left you here on purpose." The woman shook her head firmly, her eyes filled with disbelief. "No, my son would never do such a thing. He's my only child. I raised him myself. He loves me." The farmer sighed. "I will search for him near the water spring and return to you, God willing." The farmer left and spent hours looking, but there was no trace of the son. When he returned to the mother, he told her solemnly, "Mother, it pains me to say this, but I believe your son has abandoned you here to die." The mother, her voice trembling with faith and resolve, replied, "By God, I will not speak another word against my son. I will wait for him to return, and God is my witness." With that, the mother left the spot and wandered through the edges of the forest. She recited verses from the Quran as she walked, finding comfort in her faith. Eventually, she sat on a tree trunk to rest, unaware that a pool of blood had stained the ground nearby. Without noticing, her hand and clothing became smeared with the blood as she stood to continue her journey. As she wandered, some villagers passing through the forest spotted her. Alarmed by her appearance and the blood on her clothes, they became suspicious. One of them said, "She must be responsible for a murder. Look at her hands and clothes, she's covered in blood." They grabbed the old woman and dragged her to the village court to present her to the judge. "My lord," one of them began, "we found this old woman wandering in the forest. Her hands and clothes are covered in blood. Surely she has killed someone." The mother, now standing before the judge, remained calm, her eyes lowered as the accusations mounted against her. The judge arrived to question the elderly woman, but she remained silent, her tears streaming continuously. She refused to speak, bound by the vow she made to wait for her son's return. Moments later, someone rushed into the courtroom. "My lord," he announced, "we have found the body of a child, a boy no older than 3, lying near a tree trunk in the forest. The blood on her hands and clothes must have come from being near the body." The judge frowned and addressed the mother sternly. "This evidence points to you as the killer. The child's mother reported that an elderly woman abducted her son. How do you defend yourself?" The mother's only response was silent tears. She kept her oath, refusing to speak until her son returned. The judge grew frustrated. "If you will not defend yourself, then the court has no choice but to sentence you to death by beheading, as justice for the murdered child." She was taken to a small, cramped cell, chained to the walls as she awaited her fate. Despite her circumstances, the mother wept not for herself, but for her son, still holding on to the faint hope that he might return. That night, as the mother succumbed to restless sleep in her cell, her son lay in his home, tormented by guilt. His wife celebrated, pleased that he had rid himself of his mother, but his heart ached. Memories of his mother's love and sacrifices plagued his mind. When he finally fell asleep, a vivid nightmare engulfed him. He saw himself shackled in chains, surrounded by blazing flames that threatened to consume him. Helpless, he screamed for aid, but the fire closed in. Suddenly, his mother appeared, freeing him from the chains and saving him from the flames. But before he could thank her, the flames returned, and she stepped back, leaving him bound again. "Mother!" he cried out in desperation. Each time she saved him, only for him to be consumed by the flames again. As the nightmare reached its peak, she smiled sadly and disappeared. He woke in a panic, his heart racing. "What have I done? My mother. She's still waiting for me." Determined to make things right, he told his wife, "I'm going to find my mother. I won't abandon her again." Furious, she snapped, "If you leave, I won't be here when you return." He stood firm. "I choose my mother over everything, including you. From now on, you are no longer my wife." Without hesitation, he ran to the forest, searching for his mother, but she was nowhere to be found. The next day, she was taken, bound in chains, to the city square to have her head severed. The executioner, a towering man with a sharp sword, arrived with another man who loudly announced to the gathered crowd, "By the ruler's decree, the elderly woman shall be executed as punishment for the alleged murder of the child. The time has come for her to face justice." The mother was forced to kneel, her hands tied behind her back, and a basket was placed beneath her head. The executioner raised his sword high, ready to strike. The old woman lifted her gaze to the sky and said, "O my Lord, all praise is due to you in every circumstance. I am content with your decree." Then she closed her eyes and declared, "I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger." Suddenly, a loud and piercing scream rang out, halting everyone in their tracks. A man emerged from the crowd, shoving aside those in his way until he reached the old woman. The guards seized him, and it was revealed that this man was her son, the very one who had abandoned her in the forest. He cried out to her, tears streaming from his eyes, "Mother, I am your son Ali. I am here, mother." The woman looked at him, her face lighting up with joy. "My dear son, I've been waiting for you. I knew you would return. Praise be to Allah, who extended my life so that I could see you again." Her words overwhelmed him with grief, and he broke into uncontrollable sobs. The gathered crowd, deeply moved, began demanding her release. The ruler, witnessing the scene, ordered her freedom and allowed her son to embrace her. He rushed to her, kissing her hands and feet, tears streaming down his face, soaking his lashes as his mother wept alongside him. "Forgive me, mother," he pleaded. Then, overcome with guilt, he placed his head beneath the executioner's blade and declared, "By Allah, I deserve death now." But his mother lifted his head and said, "My son, I was never angry with you to begin with, so there is nothing to forgive." Her son broke into loud, childlike sobs. The onlookers were deeply moved, their hearts softened, and tears fell freely, especially from the women in the crowd. The commander stepped up to the judgment platform and said, "Finally, you have spoken." The elderly woman replied, "I made a vow to Allah that I would not speak until my son returned to me." The commander asked, "But you are accused of murder." The mother swore, "I swear to Allah, I have not killed anyone, nor have I even seen this child." The commander retorted, "But all the evidence points to you." Her son stood then and said, "Allow me to speak, Your Honor. She is my mother and I know her well. She never once struck me in my life. If justice must be served, take my life instead of hers." The commander shook his head, saying, "Justice does not work that way." The mother then interjected, "Your Honor, I overheard the guards while I was in my cell saying there are several women under suspicion." The commander nodded. "That is true. We have detained 4 women and questioned them, but all have denied the charges." The mother requested, "With your permission, Your Honor, bring the 4 women together in one place and follow my instructions." The commander ordered the guards to gather the women, stating, "I believe she may be onto something." The women were brought in, and the executioner stood nearby with his sword. At the sight of him, the women became visibly nervous. One of the guards spoke, "Your Honor, we found evidence near the tree where the body was discovered. The tree emits a strong fragrance, and the killer's body must have absorbed its scent." At that, one of the women instinctively sniffed herself, and the commander noticed. He shouted, "You are the murderer of the 9 victims!" Panicking, she blurted out, "What 9 victims? I only killed 1 child." The commander responded, "So it is a child you admit to killing. There are no 9 victims and no scent. Your actions revealed the truth." The guilty woman was arrested, and the mother and son were freed. They returned home, grateful to Allah for His mercy. This story is a reminder of Allah's grace and His deliverance in times of hardship. May peace and blessings be upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to encourage us to share more stories.